Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're so glad to have you join us this afternoon, talking a little bit about AI and the process when it comes to career application process. We're going to spend some time talking about what AI is, and then also going to share a little bit more about how that is in terms of a career application process. So we're going to introduce who we are today, and we're going to spend some time learning a little bit more about what this looks like. My name is Beth Hahnemann, and I'm our Associate Director here at the University of Kentucky. And we have the privilege of working with a lot of students, especially when it comes to alumni, prospective students, and current students when it comes to their resumes and applications.
And my name is Jennifer Smith, and I'm Assistant Director for Career Advising.
So Jennifer's fantastic when it comes to resume and resources. So we're really excited that we're going to spend some time talking about what it looks like when it comes to AI and how it actually has changed over the years when it comes to like hiring and the process within that. All right. So we're going to begin, actually, believe it or not, with kind of technology and career planning and applications. Why we wanted to share with this is because many times you might get advice from different people, and it doesn't mean their advice isn't good or bad. It just means that their perspective might be about when they actually went about applying for positions or jobs. And AI has changed the landscape of what this looks like in a variety of different ways. So I don't know if anybody actually knows what this looks like, right? It's a typewriter. Jennifer and I are smiling. My grandma on that particular one would have it at home, and I would literally practice on it when I was younger. I just love the sound of it when it comes to different resources. So if you can imagine, prior in terms of having a typewriter in the space, we would actually use this in terms of maybe handwritten, right? So someone would write out their information that they might have had on that setting. As a typewriter, when you think about it, you would literally have to type line by line of what they were looking for. You might have had an eraser to kind of go and update anything that was changes in those resources within those settings and spaces. Then it kind of changed over to word processors. Is anybody familiar with a word processor or brother on that particular area? This one was a little bit more, you might have had the different types of paper that had the holes on the side, and it printed off multiple different ones versus the leaf sheet paper for it. It shifted a little bit more because what you could do is not necessarily just type line by line, but it had a shorter memory, and in many cases that you're able to type maybe a line, and then before it actually would go onto the paper, you could actually see it and then delete it a little bit. It's kind of the first kind of version of our version of kind of like using a computer within that space. How did that change when it comes to hiring within that? Is that when you think about the process for it, they might have posted different like positions and said, hey, these are the list of jobs that we would have. But still people would turn it in. They might have like the little bubbling sheets within it. So they might have still used, the word processor. Sometimes they use the typewriter within that setting too. This might look familiar for many of you on that setting. If you had the old school computers, I remember working the other day and chatting with my niece on that particular setting, and she saw this. And my parents actually have one still down in their basement. And she was like, this is so heavy. How did people even walk across campus with these old computers, right? You had the large monitors, you had the mouses that weren't wireless. And then, of course, you had the stand-up element within the spaces for it. Does anybody remember the floppy disks on the space, or maybe the actual hard drives within it? So what we're shifting over is you actually then have the computers. It could be where the black screen and the green writing, but technology then kind of shifted and changed, right? Because people would have computers, you're able to save it on that setting. So what would happen is they would start maybe potentially writing out, their resumes, saving it, maybe having more than one resume to kind of tweak and change within the different settings for it. And so over time, when that would tweak and change, then we actually got the element of email. So when you think about it, there's a scene from Friends. If anybody's a fan of Friends, you can see that process where she's printing it off and everybody's helping to mail it out. And they say, gosh, I noticed blank. Do we need to go and change that? And they're like, nope, it's this one instead, are some of the examples on that setting. And so when you think about email, it's shifted, right? Where people can get it instantaneously. Instead of I'm just mailing out a resume or a cover letter for people, and it may take 3 to 4 business days for them to even get it in hand or at the location. Email is more instantaneous within those kind of settings for people to have those kind of connections. Why I share this about AI is because when you shift and change for technology, how hiring happens changes too. And so when you think about that process for it, the speed then comes for more people to kind of apply for different positions that are looking at it. And so then that actually changed to online applications. And so you now have forms that many of you go online to a particular website, complete those particular forms and settings on those particular areas, and then have it where it comes to that different spaces that people are looking at. So when you think about AI, and you think about technology over the years, it's helping the idea sometimes with the process, but we're going to kind of talk about why both matters in terms of technology. So it may shift in terms of using something new as an email, right? But then it might be more people are emailing people. So how do you make that resume more specific for what they're looking for? Applications online may take it where you have to fill out more information, more background, past experiences that's beyond your resume, but it's also used in terms of that hiring process. So both are important, right? It's understanding how that kind of changed over time and those resources. So if you imagine back in, like, let's say the 90s, when people would, still be printing off a particular resume and mailing it off with that stamp that they would have, it may take longer for people to hear back. Where now it might be like, okay, I know my application is complete. I turned it in online, and you can track it within that kind of setting as well. So what is AI? You get a lot of times with different people, looking at it in different ways. So when you think about artificial intelligence, it's a collection of technologies, and you just kind of see and heard that over the years, that allows computers to perform tasks that might mimic human intelligence. So if anybody has an iPhone, when we first had that developed and out and about, of a smartphone. My dad still has a flip phone, and I'll never forget when he got it. His the flip phone. Everybody else has iPhones. He's like, "What's going on?" He's like, "I just need to call people, right?" And now there's different communications for texting, right? Or it may start writing what you're looking for prior for you to even finishing that sentence. It's using that system within it. So there are different versions of AI over the years, right? Spell check is one of those examples. When you think about using spell check that you would have naturally when it comes to your computer, it's built in, that's a version of AI. That's the idea of like, okay, I'm typing this, I'm wanting to make sure the spell check is there within the different areas that you're looking for. I'm dyslexic, so I'll be really honest, that's been really helpful for me because there's times where I might invert words or I thought I'd spell it correctly within the different areas. In addition, Grammarly, that's another example, right? Where it's helping you in terms of knowing the correct grammar that you might have. That's come into play for a lot of our students or even people in the workforce, especially if you're using it in a different setting. So maybe someone's like, hey, I want to, have this particular grammar that's going to be used for this tone. Other ones might be if you're in a different, geographic location that might be using a different language. And then some of you might have heard of Chat GPT. That's another one that's helping you to kind of have that AI, where it's helping to generate ideas and thoughts within that. And we're going to share how that's changed when it comes to both resumes and interviewing. And then finally, ones that some of you might not have been part of is Microsoft's new artificial intelligence tool, the Copilot. In addition to helping when it comes to writing different resources and spaces, it actually can help with presentations and help them generate different images. And so that's going to be where that kind of comes into play of what is authentic and real and making sure that you're representing what you want to have represented. So this came from MACE, which is our National Association of Colleges and Employers. And let's take a look at basically about how people are actually using AI in a work task. And so you can kind of see many of them are helping to compose emails where it might be this idea of knowing your pattern of send off. Maybe you write sincerely, maybe you write warm regards. Maybe it's helping to finish those sentences. Very similar to when you text on those particular process for it. Answering questions, same example on that particular one, helping to respond back. So if you've ever been online working with a company and someone has a question about a process, it's AI generated to kind of say, this might be the question that you're asking next. Helping to write a letter on that space, creating presentations, some examples and reports within those different ones are going to be our top 5 areas within it. So it's being used, right, in a different setting. But we're going to take a look at that other part that's down at the bottom, that 34%, on how that's been kind of used when it comes to the space of hiring. And I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer.
Thank you, Beth. It was a nice trip down memory lane, going through some of those old technologies and everything, and especially the big block computer. That is definitely what I remember getting when I was in school, and I definitely remember what a floppy disk is because that's how I used to save a lot of the papers that I had to write. So as Beth mentioned, we're going to talk about AI and hiring, particularly when it comes to resumes and also just candidate screening. So we as applicants and also in our daily positions at work, we have started to use, and we've seen an increase in the use of AI in terms of how we prepare applicant documents and things like that when people are wanting to apply to positions. But just as applicants are starting to use AI in preparing those applicant documents, employers are using AI to review candidate documents as well. So in the use of, with AI and hiring, a primary way in which they're doing that is using what's called applicant tracking systems. Applicant tracking systems can be just a simple way for employers to kind of organize their applicants. They can also be a full suite of tools that employers use to help them in their candidate search for open positions. For employers, this helps streamlines the search and decision process for employers. It can help organize candidate application a lot more efficiently. It can serve as that central database for employers that of applicants where they use in their hiring decisions. But some of those applicant tracking systems, and what we want applicants to be aware of, is that those systems can actually do the screening for employers. So before a person begins to look at your application or your resume and cover letter, for example, the applicant tracking system may do that for the employer beforehand. So I have my friend over here on the screen. I've nicknamed him Harold. But imagine essentially that you're applying for a position, and before your resume and your cover letter is seen by a person, it's seen by essentially a robot first. It's seen by a computer system first. And sometimes that computer system, depending on how the employer chooses to use it, it may even tell the employer if you're a qualified candidate or not. Sometimes those systems will give the employer a percentage match on how well a candidate fits a position. And so that's creating that, it's getting that information from scanning our resume and our cover letter first. And a lot of that is done by keyword-based screening. So those systems are looking through our documents and seeing those relevant keywords that are on our resume or cover letter, and essentially telling the employer if we are qualified for a position and how much we're qualified for a position. If you can go to the next slide, Beth. So some pros and cons to AI in hiring. For employers, it can improve staffing levels. It can compile a list of quality candidates faster than a person can. And so this has really streamlined the process for employers and made hiring a lot faster. It can also improve candidate experience in terms of candidates learning sooner rather than later what the status updates are on their applications, whether or not they've been accepted, if they've moved further into the process, or if they have sometimes been automatically rejected, which we'll talk about in another slide as well. Some of the cons to AI in hiring is there is still a risk for bias. And so sometimes we may think that because of an AI system is being used, that bias, that risk for bias has been removed, but it is still there in that system. There's also less opportunity for relationship building. It can hinder the ability to develop an applicant pool. So the employer, if they have less contact with applicants, then there's less opportunity for people to just connect with other people in finding qualified candidates. And there can be false negatives and positives. So candidates may still pass through the screenings, but they may not match the employer criteria. So sometimes they may receive, a number from their applicant tracking system if they have 10 qualified candidates, and a few of those may still not match, but they somehow made it through the candidate process. And next slide. Okay, so with that, we need to make sure on our end as applicants that we are aware of the AI systems that are out there and what those AI systems are capable of, and how we go about preparing our documents when it comes to making sure that we apply effectively to positions. So in writing effective resumes, to make sure that we pass through those AI systems as the candidate, it's important for us to use simple single column format on a Word or a Google Doc. There is a lot of information out there on the internet and different systems, especially on Word or on websites like Canva and things like that, that offer resume templates. But those templates still sometimes teach bad habits when it comes to resumes. One of those example of that is a lot of Canva templates or Word templates or Google templates that you see online. They have a spot on the resume for a personal photo, and we're still not to the point where we encourage or use personal photos on resumes. Some employers may even have a policy where they automatically reject any resume that comes to them with a personal photo on it. A personal photo can lead to bias. A lot of assumptions can be made from a personal photo. And so it's another one of those main reasons why we encourage people to not put personal photos on resumes. But a lot of templates that are out there have areas on their resume for personal photo. So we always encourage just using a simple single column Word format on a Google Doc or a Word document, and we leave off those personal photos. We don't use multiple columns and things like that. Another reason for not using multiple columns is that as great as technology is and as advanced as some of these systems are, they still don't read a lot of text boxes well, and also multiple columns well. So what we put into the AI system looks nice and it looks pretty. It's not what may come out on the other end for the employer. And so those systems have trouble reading those multiple text boxes and columns on our resumes. And so that's why we recommend still using just a single column format on a Word document or a Google document. You'll always want to make sure that you review for misspelled words or grammatical errors. Sometimes those AI systems are screening just for those small details, but details matter to an employer. And so if those AI systems are looking for those errors, it will flag your resume for an employer. You'll want to make sure that you customize each resume for a specific position. Be intentional in your wording on your content. And we don't want to overstuff the resume with keywords where it sounds like we're a jack of all trades and we can do everything. The employer really just needs to know if we can do the job that they're advertising. So we want to be intentional with the information that we share, and using some of those relevant keywords that are found in the job description is a great way to get us matched with the employer, because the system will be looking for those specific words. But we want to build them into our experience and not just explain that we have a skill, but how we have used a skill as well. And then I mentioned on here, avoid inserting tables, images, or graphics. Sometimes we'll use additional graphics on resumes, but that can also be detrimental when it comes to passing through applicant tracking systems and also tables. So we want to try to avoid that in our resume writing. You can go to the next slide. So in using AI to write resumes, this is becoming more and more of a topic. We're hearing more of these conversations at different professional development organizations that we're a part of as well, because it's there. It's a tool, it's a resource. It's neither good or bad. It's just something that is available to us as applicants. AI tools can generate content quickly for resumes. It sometimes also helps us in developing those professional style sounding bullet points, because the way that we talk on resumes is a little different than how we normally communicate from day to day. I don't typically walk around the office, and Beth can attest to this, using those powerful action verbs and saying that I communicated and collaborated with my colleagues that day and things like that. We don't walk around talking like that normally on our day-to-day, work activities. However, on our resumes, we do need that elevated professional style language. And so sometimes those AI tools can help us write that in that language that we're not particularly familiar with or comfortable using, because it's not our normal. However, in knowing that, we have to make sure that we edit and we personalize our content. We don't want to just copy paste if we use AI to help us write our resume. The resume document or the cover letter, it still needs to sound like us. At the end of the day, the employer is going to be hiring a person, you, hopefully, right? And it still needs to sound like us. And once we submit a resume and a cover letter, and it may not sound authentically like us, we still have to go in and interview. And we still have to go in and talk about our experiences effectively and give detail and provide more context on our experiences. And sometimes that can be challenging if we use AI to solely write our documents. And when we go into an interview and it sounds completely different to the employer, that can sometimes be a red flag to them. So we want our information to be authentic. We want to make sure that if we use these tools for assistance in writing our documents, we have to go back through and we have to edit and update and personalize our experiences as well. Next slide. So with AI in interviews, we'll transition a little bit and talking about this conversation as well. With employers and how employers use AI in interviews, they have software where now it's becoming more common where employers have software that have candidates record interviews prior to coming on site or even offering them the position. And sometimes the interview will not be with a person, but everything will be pre-recorded. And so when the candidate sits down to do this interview, they will be asked a question either on the screen or a pre-recorded question, and the candidate needs to answer and give their response. The AI software then goes back and assesses the response from the candidate, and this is done before even bringing a person on site or having them meet with a person. Sometimes this is used just to confirm that it's a real person, just to make sure that they have the right candidate and the responses match the application documentation, either your resume, cover letter, or both. Beth, did you want to do this one or is this me still?
I can do it. Cool. So Jennifer gave such great information. She is fantastic on that particular one of helping when it comes to resumes and interviews. When you think about AI there is a tool to help us, right? It's not the idea that's replacing within it. And so your viewpoint, who you are as a human being and your perspective is still there. And so you can actually use AI to actually practice for interviews. Why I like that is because many times you might be, I don't know, chatting with, let's say, a family member or a friend, and they may not necessarily feel comfortable to tell you that you should make more eye contact or less. So practicing online actually gives you that feedback to say, gosh, am I engaging with this other person? What does that look like? And nowadays, when we talked about that evolution of history, in the past, it would have been one of those things where you submit in your resume and you might have gotten a phone call to confirm you're the person and then be like, yes, come on in, we'd like to talk to you. Today, when you think about it, it could be where it's over Zoom, but as Jennifer alluded to, many times they're actually having you record to prove that you're a same person and that your information that you actually submitted is the same information that you're talking about. And so as much as AI helps in some ways, it's helping on both sides, right? To evaluate and making sure that that particular person has professional responses within it. The other thing that's helpful when it comes to AI and helping for interviews, it gives you a chance to actually share your experiences and give examples with the different areas. And sometimes I've seen even employers do it to kind of say, can this person actually make that kind of connection without someone else being there? Because they want to know, can you do a presentation? Can you interact with people in different settings and groups of what that would look like? And so it's not the idea they're taking away this human connection. What they're doing is using technology in a way to help kind of find that kind of presence that they're looking for in those tools. I don't know about you, but technology isn't going away. And so many times when you think about how COVID changed how we interact with people, people are doing meetings and presentations over Zoom, and a lot of hiring's happening without anybody ever actually stepping foot in the main office or working remotely. And that's examples of what they're looking at and seeing when it comes to interviews. So what are some things to think about when it comes to AI and interviews? Are going to be a variety of different things. The first one that you think about is kind of showing that professionalism. And when you think about kind of safe and quiet location, why we show this as not professional is in the past, you might not have even thought about it. You're like, okay, I can do an interview anywhere, but you don't know who else is listening, especially if you're working in the healthcare area. Does that violate HIPAA laws in terms of information, or even being hiring when it comes to FERPA or confidentiality of information that you're sharing within that space? And so part of it, when you think about this, is yes, it might be a new environment, but showing that you understand how to interact. It may not be things that you thought about before, but these are things that are going to be important to kind of show that you're professional within it. Having a professional background. I've known numerous students that did interviews and didn't pay attention to what their background is. Maybe they're able to have one that's that you download. For example, the one I have behind me is an example that you can use that shows professionalism from the University of Kentucky. But you don't want to necessarily have your laundry there, right? You want to show that you know what it's like to work in that professional setting. This one cracks me up when it comes to camera angles because most people now are on laptops. When you think about when we had those desktops that Jennifer was laughing about before, those big ones carried across campus, that my niece was like, "What is this?" in my parents' basement. When you look at it, is like we look at laptops, right? We don't necessarily look at that camera angle to make sure, am I showing you professionalism? So if they're hiring you, and let's say this is what you do in an interview or in that recorded interview that you have, the reality is going to be like, is this what you're going to do in a meeting? Right? They want to see what that looks like for professionals in that space. Lighting's also going to be something to think about. We don't think about the environment within it because if you're going in interviews in person and before, they have the environment, right? You're thinking about, okay, I don't need to worry about the lighting there because they see me in person, right? But when you're virtual, there's a lot of things that are going to be kind of that tie that they would have in that space. And then finally, dressing head to toe. This got to be popular, of course, when people be like, oh, they're only going to see me from my waist up. You want to make sure that you're professional all the way through because that camera might change on that particular setting in space. And so the more you dress professionally head to toe, the more you're going to actually show that professionalism and have that mindset that you're there for that interview. So as much as AI has shifted things within the different areas, it's also still getting at the same thing. They want to hire the best candidate. They're looking for the people that are going to have the qualities that match up or have relatability within it. That's showing those soft skills, those NACE competencies that the National Association of Colleges and Employers say are important for any employer, right? Ranging from technology to communication skills. And so when you think about AI, it's not that it's replacing the job, it's a tool to assist you and helping you within that kind of setting and space. And also when you actually maybe get that job a couple years from now, assist you in hiring the people that you want that are connected to your company. These are a few of our resources that we want to talk about and references. We have a program called Big Interview. If you are connected to the University of Kentucky, the easiest way to get to Big Interview is through Handshake. That's our online platform to connecting you with employers, job opportunities, and different resources, including Big Interview. Big Interview has a resource that you can actually go in and start typing your experiences, and it will create and help design a resume that will actually get through the applicant tracking systems. I'll be really honest, I get a lot of students to be like, hey Beth, how do I get my resume to stand out? And truth be told, I don't want your resume to stand out. I want your resume to get through. I want your experiences to stand out. And so if anybody's a fan of the movie Legally Blonde, I know it's been around for a while on that one. She had a scented resume that was pink on that particular one. I love how Jennifer's giggling because both of us do them. We get students all the time that ask that. And so that's the difference. We don't want your resume to stand out. We want your resume to get through the application. So that process within that, they want to talk to you within that. Same when it comes to online in terms of the online tracking systems within it. Handshake can help you too within that because it can connect you to those different employers that might be, having those connections for doing mock interviews and resources within it. But also Big Interview helps with interviews. You can go in and actually practice different questions for different fields, and it will give you a score. It will give you feedback instantaneously on your eye contact. How many times did you say what did it look like in terms of your examples? Did you have structure for that answer? So that's really helpful within that. Again, hopefully you learned from this that we're not saying don't use AI. ChatGPT is a great resource. So sometimes what I'll do is use that on the hiring side to figure out what questions I want to ask. That is actually how employers are using it. And sometimes you can get different areas and topics to say, hey, one of the things we really care about is teamwork. What are questions that are related to teamwork? So you can do that too ahead of your interviews, right? Maybe thinking about what questions could they potentially ask. Same with Microsoft Copilot on that particular resources. And then we have this really awesome career resource guide that we worked on this summer, and Jennifer was one of our lead editors for it. And so that helps you understand why you're not looking for a template, but helping you kind of build that resume to get through that process. So when you think about hiring and you hear advice from different people, I love my parents dearly, even my older sister within it. But what was happening in the 90s, what was happening in the early 2000s is shifted and changed due to the technology today. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't use it. It's just making sure that you can back up that information that you have and it's in your voice within that. So there's some really cool articles if you want to learn more within that, and a really awesome book as well by Jeremy that I highly recommend too if you have additional questions. So with that, that's the link for Handshake. You're welcome to go online to make appointments with any of us in our office. They're fantastic. Again, I'm going to give you a huge shout out to Jennifer. She's great when it comes to resumes and helping with interviews as well. But we'll leave it open to any questions that people might have. You're welcome to put them in the chat and we'll help answer any of those.
There is one question in the Q&A chat.
See that. Catherine, thank you for your question. The question is, are employers obligated to let applicants know that they are using AI to help with the application review? Or do we always assume AI is being used so to adapt our resume accordingly? That's a great question. I would say, from what I know and what we've learned so far about AI and employers and hiring, employers are not obligated to let you know that they are using any type of applicant tracking system. So that is sometimes the unknown in going into the application process. We don't know if they're using AI, and we don't know to what extent they are using AI. Again, the AI system that they use could simply just be something that just organizes and categorizes applicants and just has a database for them essentially. And some employers may still review all applicants that go through the system. Other employers, if they decide to use the AI system for everything that it can offer, they may use more of like the screening criteria and things like that when it comes to looking at resumes. So our recommendation is always simply just to, again, use that, the plain Word document, making sure that we're not using any tables or text boxes or anything like that on our documents, no images, and then using single column, and making sure that we thoroughly update our resume with each position that we're wanting to apply to. And really with that, it's just about, we're going to scan that job description and we're going to highlight or circle if you need to, go old school and print it out. Or if you want to, copy paste the job description into a Word document, use the highlighter tool. Some people have even said, or, there have been some articles saying that they use it to, they copy paste the text of the job description and put it in AI, and they'll ask AI or like ChatGPT to give them a summary of the position and what words are highlighted or focused on the most. But just making sure that we highlight and we know that, employers don't have to tell us. So we know that we can do a few things to make sure that, like Beth said, we're making sure that our resume gets through the system. And that's a lot of like the tailoring and the editing and things like that.
Yeah, Jennifer, that was fantastic in terms of that response within that one. And that was a great question, Catherine. One thing I will say on that particular area in space is make sure you save it in PDFs. We're getting a lot of students that will also have it where they submit it and be like, hey, it looked great in this particular format that you had, but it got wonky because whatever system that they're using. And so we find that a lot, even just when it terms in papers for my own students in terms of teaching. So the more like, I bet that looks great, but that would be an example that you'd want to do there too. So great. And then our next question is this. Do you advise using these resources for cover letter as well? Jennifer, what's your thoughts?
Resources in terms of using ChatGPT or AI to write a cover letter, I recommend it the way that I do with resumes. Again, if we're having trouble getting started on kind of formulating our answers or writing our paragraphs that go on our cover letter, I think that we can use them. Again, they need to be, whatever it is that AI gives us, they need to be heavily edited by us as the person. We need to make sure that the information that is coming out makes sense for our experience. If we just ask the cover letter if we just ask the AI system to write us a cover letter that is for a financial analyst position or something like that, then it may talk about a lot of skills and things like that that are relevant to being a financial analyst. But if they aren't skills that we necessarily possess or their strengths, then we're not quite sure if it will give us the content that we need for that cover letter.
Yeah, and Trey in the box did a clarification. So there is different kind of tools that are used So let's say, for example, I might have spell check, right, on that one. That's not actually necessarily AI generated. That's a version of how AI have evolved versus Chat GPT. So each organization may have it where it's a tracking system what they have based off of does it match up the words that they're looking for. And some of it's going to be generated elements that they use in terms of AI for the system. So any company does not actually have to share how they actually go through and review those processes. But when in doubt, the analogy I usually give is that you wouldn't turn your history paper into your biology professor. So if you think about the history over time, when you think about writing papers within that, what you're doing is people used to write just one resume and that may be what they turned in. And it makes a lot of sense. Like if I had to type on my old typewriter over and over, Jennifer, that would not be fun to write multiple different resumes. But now you can because of technology. And so you can make it more specific within it because what they're doing with those is matching it up within those different kind of settings that you see. So just know that each screening software in terms of applicant tracking system could be a version of a tracking system, but has AI embedded that's used within the different ones to match it up. So just again, kind of making sure within that you are having your voice within it and that you're able to make sure that you get your application through the process.
All right, Jennifer, Beth, we thank you so much for sharing today. Uh, this will be recorded, so we'll make sure that you all have access to the recording. And then would you all mind to just drop your information, your email in the chat one last time, if you don't mind? And then if you all have further questions, you can always reach out to them later on in the week or in the future whenever you have something that comes up.
Absolutely, not a problem whatsoever.
Again, we thank you so much. This information was very helpful, so we greatly appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you for having us.
All right, thank you all for attending.